Good morning and welcome to this Licensing Act 2003 hearing. This is a subcommittee to hear an application for a new premises licence in respect of Burnt House Vineyard, Builderston Road, Little Finborough, Stowmarket. The subcommittee and the hearing will take the form of a fairly informal hearing procedure. There'll be some administration to go through first of all. Then the hearing itself will take the form of the licensing officer will present a brief outline of the report of the application to the subcommittee. The applicant will then be asked to make representation towards their application. There may be questions from the members of the subcommittee, and with permission of the chair of the subcommittee, other parties to this hearing can also ask questions. There will also be an opportunity for those who've made representations to make their representations verbally, and again questions may be asked in respect of those representations. There will then be a short summing up procedure. Everyone will have a quick final say, with the applicant having the final word. The subcommittee will then go into a private session to make their decision, and we'll come back as quickly as possible to announce that decision. So I'm going to move on to the election of chairman. There is no election, as Councillor Cathy Guthrie is the chair of the full Licensing and Regulatory Committee, so we'll take this subcommittee this morning. Over to you, Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning. I wonder if everybody can keep their microphones on mute, please. It's going to be quite difficult for people to do that, I understand. But anyway, welcome to the virtual meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name's Cathy Guthrie and I am taking the meeting today. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to YouTube and capable of repeated viewing. The meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential and exempt items. If you make representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consented to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. So virtual meeting etiquette, please ensure your microphones are muted when you're not speaking. And in this instance, to keep your cameras off, it's just to make sure that we get good connections. You can put them on when you are speaking. That you do not interrupt other speakers. That if you're attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Additionally, you will be invited to speak and ask questions by myself, so please wait your turn. So do we have apologies for absence, please?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest by councillors. Are there any declarations?
Chairman, I probably should declare that I personally know one of the objectors, Mrs. Truelove.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
I don't think that is. I think the lawyer could advise me on that.
Nigel, if you'd just like to comment, thank you.
That's just a personal.
Provided you are able to confirm that it will have no influence on your decision making of this subcommittee.
No, thank you, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'll do the formal introductions again. My name's Cathy Guthrie. We have Councillor Penny Otten, who's one of the members, and Councillor Dave Muller. We have the officers in attendance, Nigel DeLew, who you've just met, our legal advisor. Kay Sanders, our licensing officer. Kay, do you want to make yourself known?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair.
We'll see you in a minute. Is Catherine Green with us or not?
No.
Right, OK. And the governance officer, who you've already heard as well, is Karen Sayer.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning to you, Karen. Thank you. Can I ask the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Scarf, to put their camera on and introduce themselves, please?
So I'm Catherine Scarf and I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Scarf today.
Ah, right. OK. Because that was my next question. Is anybody going to be represented by you. So can you confirm receipt of the procedure, the reports, copies and late papers?
Yes.
You did. Thank you. And that included a letter from Mrs. Truelove that I've got here.
Yes.
Did you get that copy? You did. Thank you. Excellent. So if you'd like to switch your screen off for the moment, please. You get used to it. It's either you're mute or switch your screen off. It sort of goes along those lines. So the next people that we have Mr. Kenneth Mudd. Would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to make some views to us at the meeting?
Hello, my name's Kenneth Mudd. I live in Little Finborough in the row of houses which are adjacent to the vineyard. And my concern...
Hang on, we'll allow you to talk in a minute. It's just
Okay,
to introduce yourself, to say hello.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd. We've heard Mrs. Crickmore by phone, and is Mr. Smith with you as well for the...
Yes, I am.
Right. And Mrs. Crickmore, you're there, aren't you?
Yes,
Yes,
I'm here.
thank
I'm
you.
one of the residents as well. I am still trying to get in on Microsoft. I don't know if it will let me, but it's asking for a code. Is anybody aware? No?
I think that's going to sort of delay matters, but it should be on the email that was, it should have been on the email that was sent to you.
No, that's the link. There wasn't a code. Never mind. Well, we'll just do it by phone and I'll give up trying to get the link.
Okay, don't worry. We will hear you, and we've got your paper copy of comment here as well. So do any of the parties wish to withdraw the application or their representation?
No.
No.
Nope.
Right, thank you. So this is my question to the licensing officer now. Have there been any requests for the parties for permission to call witnesses?
No, Chair.
And have the parties indicated they wish to present documentary or other material other than what we've received already?
Nothing other than what we've received. If I could just note that the additional material submitted by Mrs. Truelove, she did mention another property. The occupier from that house has not submitted an objection.
Thank you very much indeed. So I need to go round everybody and ask you timing. So I'll come to the applicants, please. Well, it'll be Catherine Scarf, thank you. How long do you think it would take for you to present your case, please?
Hopefully maximum 4 minutes.
Oh, 4 minutes, right. And Mr. Mudd, how long do you think you might be to present your case?
I originally said 8 minutes, but I think it's probably nearer 5.
5 minutes, thank you. I don't think we're going to hold you up for 1 minute. It's just to get a feel of the length of our meeting. And finally, Mrs. Crickmore and Mr. Smith, how long will it take for you to present your comments?
We both wanted to say a little bit of something, but I don't think either of us will take any more than about 5 minutes. So probably about 2.
So that's I beg your pardon?
We probably only want 2 or 3 minutes each. We're both going to say something individually.
Right. Okay. I think that's satisfactory. Nigel, do you agree? Good.
Yes,
right,
that's fine. It's your discretion.
Yes, it seems appropriate for the matter before us. So may I now ask the licensing officer to present your report and summarise the matter under consideration, please.
Thank you, Chair. This hearing is to determine an application made for a grant of a new premise licence made under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 by Stuart and Jill Scarf at Burnt House Vineyard, Builderston Road, Little Finborough, Stowmarket. The application was received by the Licensing Authority on the 7th of February 2022, and a copy of this is attached to this report as Appendix A. The application made has been subject to the statutory consultation period as prescribed by regulation. The notices advertising the application have been on display at the premise and published in the East Anglian Daily Times on the 8th of February 2022 edition. Full details of the proposed activities and timings are contained within the application form attached as Appendix A. The operating schedule steps proposed by the applicant to promote the 4 licensing objectives are attached as Appendix B. A hearing is necessary to determine the application following receipt of representations which have not been withdrawn. The subcommittee will be aware that its consideration is confined to the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, and the need or commercial demand for licensed premises are not considerations for the licensing authority when discharging its licensing functions. The licensing authority must carry out its functions under the Act with a view to promoting the 4 licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The subcommittee will also be aware of Human Rights Act 1998 considerations, specifically Article 6 for the applicant and Articles 8 and 1 of Protocol 1 for those raising representations when determining applications for the grant of a new licence. The licensing authority has received no representations from the responsible authorities. Further considerations and conditions have been agreed by the applicant after mediation with Environmental Protection. These are attached as Appendix D. There have been 3 representations received made by other persons, which include local residents, businesses and residents' associations. This is attached as Appendix E. The subcommittee must, having regard to the representations made, take such of the steps, if any, as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. To grant the licence subject to conditions which are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application, modified to such an extent as the authority considers appropriate for promotion of the objectives. All licences are subject to all mandatory conditions which must be included in the licence. To exclude from the scope of the licence any licensable activities which the application relates, to refuse to specify a person in the licence as a premise supervisor, or to reject the application. And if I can just note for clarification, live and recorded music have been applied for, but under the Licensing Act deregulation, a licence is not required to stage a performance of live music or the playing of recorded music if it takes place between 8 AM and 2300 hours and it takes place at an alcohol on licensed premise and an audience of no more than 500 people. That concludes my summary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kay. I will now ask the applicant and the other persons present if they have any questions of the officer of what they've heard, or any questions for clarity really here. So Catherine Scarf, do you have any questions for the officer?
No questions.
And Mr. Kenneth Mudd, any questions?
Yes, I'm just asking about the fact that there's no license required for the music at all. That's what I understood Ms. Saunders to say?
Yes, the hours that have been applied for do in actual fact come under the Licensing Act deregulation.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Mr. Smith?
For an event of up to 500 people for music, we don't need a license at all, or there's no permissions needed for that event to take place?
If the premise is subject or has a license in place for on sales of alcohol, and it's between the hours of 8 in the morning and 2300 hours, no more than 500 people, under deregulation, a license is not required.
Okay.
What happens if the license is issued for off sale and not on sale? What is the difference between the two?
It would need to be licensed.
So if it's off sale, where they can sell wine like a shop does,
yes,
then presumably they wouldn't be able to do amplified music. But if it's, am I right in understanding that if it's on sales, it's selling alcohol by the glass, and then they would be able to do music? Is that the difference?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. If it's not on, if it wasn't on the license and they only had off sales, they wouldn't be able to do the deregulation. If they had off sales and wanted regulated entertainment, i.e. music, then they would have to include it on their licence application.
That's difficult getting your head around it, but that's the answer to your questions, I think. Yes.
Would they be able to apply for a one-off licence for music with off sales, or would it have to be an applied for off sales with music because it doesn't come under the deregulation?
If something didn't come under deregulation and they just had off sales and they wanted a one-off event, they could apply for a temporary event notice.
Okay, lovely. I understand now.
It is confusing, but it's worthwhile making it clear. Thank you for your question. So can I ask the subcommittee, Councillor Otten, do you have any further questioning? Because I know that was something you were interested in. Can you put your mic on, please? And then we can hear.
Done that now. Yes, I mean, the other question I think we need clarifying is the difference between what a planning application requires or does not require, or what limits there will be between that and a licence permission. And I think it would be useful if the Mr. Delew could just explain that for ourselves and the members of the public, please.
Thank you for your question. Nigel, if you could come back with that one, please. Yes,
we have basically two separate regimes. The council is a local planning authority, and it is also the local licensing authority. And when it acts as one or the other, it only concentrates and only deals with the application of that legislation. So there will be a certain amount of criteria when giving planning permission. It's more of an amenity related issues, where the licensing deals solely with the 4 licensing objectives. Now there is potential for permissions to conflict with each other. For example, a license may be granted for say 24 hours a day because that application does not overly impinge on the licensing objectives, but there may be planning reasons why a planning permission will only grant opening hours for say 12 hours a day. Now where you have that instance, it is up to the owner of the premises to comply with both sets. So therefore it's the one that has the lesser hours that they need to comply with, because if they extend over those hours, although they're not committing any breaches of the licensing legislation, they are breaching the planning legislation, and it will be for the local authority as the planning enforcement authority to take action on that. So although you may have a 24-hour license, if you do not have the requisite planning consent to actually operate during those hours, you have to stick with the lesser time limit. And vice versa, you know, you could have planning for 24 hours, but for whatever reasons under the licensing objectives, the subcommittee has decided that that's too long. You would have to restrict yourselves to what the licensing committee has imposed. I hope that makes that clear.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's very clear and very helpful. Councillor Muller, do you have any questions for the officer? Or
no questions for the officer, thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to Catherine Scarf to present your case, if you would, please.
Okay, so I am attending the hearing as the designated personal licence holder for Burnt House Vineyard and representing the application made by Jill and Stuart Scarf of Scarf Farms. As a designated premises supervisor, I have level 2 award for personal licence holders. Fens Farm is a 4th generation family farm. After many years of planning, we diversified the farm in 2017 and planted a vineyard. The vineyard is 22 acres and is one of the largest in Suffolk. Our grapes supply both our own production and another brand. In 2020, we decided to further diversify the farm and have our own grapes vinified in order for us to have our own brand of wine, which is the first vintage is set to be released in spring 2022. To allow us to sell our wine, we are currently constructing our cellar door. This will allow us to sell directly to our customers, however, also allow us to encourage customers both near and far away to visit our vineyard and learn about an exciting new industry. Our vineyard and cellar door will be creating a number of skilled jobs. We are applying for our premises licence to enable us to sell alcohol and soft beverages and from time to time have the ability to host events. After discussing with representatives from environmental health, we concluded that a number of conditions should be applied to ensure that we protect our neighbours and support the licensing objectives. We would like to be able to offer seasonal tastings, wine and cheese pairings, food with wine flights and outdoor events, including wine tours and tastings and walking wine tours. Events with over 51 attendees will be limited to 20 per annum, for example, harvest celebrations and those mentioned in the application for the licence. Wedding events will also be limited to 20 per annum. I will ensure that close residents are always kept informed of the programme of events. Myself or an appointed member of staff in charge will always be on site if an event has been organised. We can confirm that myself, Catherine Scarf, will be the point of contact with regards to any noise, and my contact telephone number is available for the village community. Further conditions that have been proposed are ensuring that we measure noise levels if and when an event takes place. Therefore, we have further created documents of working practices that will be in place of the premises licences granted, which I believe was circulated. The dispersal policy that will be in place will be put in place to ensure that the customers leave quietly with consideration of our neighbours. We'll have signs displayed for this purpose and all staff will be trained to ensure that customers respect our neighbours and will be asked to leave quietly. A noise management plan has also been created to outline how during events we will manage noise to ensure that there is no disturbance to our neighbours. And during events, customers will be held in the event space who are waiting for a taxi, so there's no undue noise in the car park. We've also created an age verification policy to ensure that all staff are trained in the supply and sale of alcohol. Our staff will be trained in checking IDs and applying the Challenge 25 policy. All staff will be trained in Level 1 award in responsible alcohol retailing. And we will not operate outside of our planning conditions. And fire risk assessment, food safety regulation assessments and health and safety risk assessments will be completed when the building is near completion. There were further comments made from a representative, so we wanted to answer some of those questions that were asked about the conditions that were proposed with environmental health. So please note that the property that is mentioned belongs to my brother, who also works for the business. James has confirmed in writing to the licensing team that he does not want his property referenced or to be included in the application, and that he believes his house is closest in proximity. We can deliver the programme of events to those who wish to receive this by email or letter if they're unable to have access to the internet or walk to the vineyard. And music will be measured to those stated in proposed conditions section 7 and monitored via a noise management plan. And there is an agreed lighting plan approved with Mid-Suffolk Planning to ensure that we do not disturb or have a permanent effect on the wildlife and our neighbours. We have also a dispersal policy that has been circulated to ensure that noise from customers leaving is monitored and does not cause disturbance. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm smiling because you looked as though you were having to hold to the minute, but you know, it was just flexible to know how long people might take. So first of all, if I ask the other persons present, just if they have any questions again. So I will ask Mr. Mudd, do you have any questions?
I did have one question, please. Yes. Catherine said there would be no disturbance to the neighbours. Sound travels quite a long way. How will you ensure, please, that the sound is not audible to the neighbouring properties?
So one of the conditions, section 7, is that we will be monitoring noise levels. So the noise should be not exceed LA 90 by more than 5 dB in any 15-minute period. So as mentioned in our noise management plan, we will be purchasing a handheld monitor and be monitoring the noise and keeping record of that to ensure that noise isn't a major disturbance to the neighbours.
How loud will that be in my garden is the question really that I'm asking.
So I believe that LA 90 is just background noise. So it's at a level that is considered not to be a nuisance according to environmental health.
And 5 decibels is almost 4 times as loud. Is that correct?
I'm afraid I don't know the specifics on the decibels, how loud that would be.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, I think I have a couple here. Catherine mentioned that there's going to be wine sold, soft drinks, probably hot beverages. Is it going to include spirits, beer? Is that on the agenda? Or will they not be included at all? Is it just going to be wine and soft drinks?
So our primary business is to offer our wine. However, it might be that customers don't want to drink wine. So some customers might come as a couple. One likes wine, one doesn't, but they still want to have the experience of seeing the vineyard and enjoying the space. Therefore, we would like to offer other beverages, so such as beer.
So you will be selling spirits and beer?
Yes, possibly, yes.
Possibly. That's a yes, I think, isn't it, rather than a possibly.
So
okay.
It's a yes on the beer, but not on the spirits.
So no spirits?
My intention is not to sell spirits. Can we just have an interjection here for a minute? If you could just hold for a minute. With Kay, would you just like to clear that the licence would allow any variety of alcohol? Could you just confirm that? Kay?
Yes, it would.
Yes, thank you. So do you have any further questions?
Yes, it's regarding noise. It's a limited 15-minute period. So is it going to be noisy? Will the noise levels rise for 15 minutes? And then somebody will say, we're going to have to turn it down. And it goes down for 10 minutes. And then it goes up again for 15 minutes. And then someone says, well, we've got to turn it down again. Are we going to get this noise coming and going? Or I'm wondering how this is going to be monitored. I know you've said you've got handheld monitors, but this is a very grey area. There's nothing almost in stone. I would like to have a bit more reassurance as to that we really won't hear very much at all. But I fear we may be forever having when we have our windows open in summer, on a summer's evening at 11:30, we get quite a lot of noise interference, intrusion.
So 11:30, we've not applied for the music to go on that late. So
Okay.
the license being applied for is for licensed music to finish at 11, and there's an extra 30 minutes on our opening times just to allow for drink up. So if someone's bought a drink, they can drink up. With regards to the 15-minute period, our intention is to keep that a very solid noise. We don't intend on having something loud and then dropping it back down. That's not the intention at all. It is to keep a steady noise level, which, using the noise management plan, we would be constantly monitoring that at different points in the boundaries.
Okay. Is it just a suggestion? Is it possible to have apparatus that measures the noise level, so when it hits that noise, it turns the whole thing off? Is that a possibility? Or is it just going to be somebody listening and pointing a machine at something and saying, oh, we've got to turn it down?
But I think your noise management plan covers that, doesn't it? That you would make, could you help us on that, Catherine? So it would be managed manually. It wouldn't have an automatic cut-off. But with the noise management plan, as we are, taking that reading at a regular time and recording that as well. So that would be available for environmental health to see. That's when we would be adjusting the noise levels. But again, just to reassure, our intention is not to fluctuate that noise for 10 minutes and then drop it. It is to keep a level noise level. I think, Mr. Smith, you've had a sort of a good inquiry to the noise level of what's proposed. Nigel, would you agree with me on that we've sort of explored that quite fully, do you think?
Yes, Chair. I mean, there's no one here from environmental protection because they haven't raised any concerns themselves. There's no one here with the technical knowledge on these, and I know they are quite complex. All I would say is that these are conditions that our environmental protection team are satisfied with, and feel that would mitigate sufficiently to avoid any impact on the licensing objectives.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to cut you short, Mr. Smith, but, you know, as Nigel's just explained, there's a limit to sort of the answers that we can get at the moment and what's proposed. Do you have any other questions? Mrs. Crickmore or Mr. Smith, do you have any other questions, please?
Well, I would just like to point out, if people present could look at page 41, that's been sent out with the notice of hearing. It's the sort of aerial photograph of the area under discussion. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner where it says Builderston Road, the car park for the venue is right next to the road at that point. And the other side of where it says Builderston Road, you can see a hedge line. That is actually part of our property. That is our garden, which
so
is
your question, what is your question, please?
The noise level from the car park is going to be much louder for us in particular, because the car park is immediately opposite where our garden is.
So, Mrs. Crickmore, do you have a question? You'll have an opportunity to say all this in a few moments, but
yeah.
This point of proceedings, it's just questions for Ms. Scarf.
Well, it's a comment, really. I mean, any increase in the noise level is going to be a lot more than what it currently is.
Okay, you'll have your
opportunity. How you try to control it.
So, Mrs. Crickmore, you'll have your opportunity to expand on that in a few moments. But as I said, this is a point of proceedings for questions. If you have no more questions, then we can move on to that part of the proceedings.
Thank you. So I'll now ask the members. Councillor Otten, do you have any questions at all?
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just clarify on the events? You have 20 events and 20 outdoor events. I'm assuming some of those would be within a marquee, and I'd like clarification of whether that's classified as an indoor or outdoor event. And the other thing is, you've obviously got parking for 50 cars, but if you had a large event like a wedding, obviously that would include considerable number of people needing to park their cars. Where would they park their cars?
So I would classify anything in a marquee as outside, not inside. And with regards to the parking, the farm entrance is actually opposite, and we have further parking that is available opposite the vineyard site.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if I may just jump in, Councillor Muller, just going on from that point, what sort of numbers, well, I suppose I should ask, have you got any proposals for wedding events at the moment, and what sort of numbers are you looking for?
We have no current proposals for the weddings.
Thank you. Councillor Muller, sorry, I just jumped in on the back of Councillor Otten's question.
That's fine, thank you. Just one question, which I sort of picked up from the papers. It seems that the premises are still under construction. Can you just confirm when the premises will be completed, please, Mrs. Scarr?
Yep. So we're hoping to be completed by the end of July.
Thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed.
Should I just comment on the additional parking?
No, just a minute, please. Can I just continue with the case, and you'll be able to make your comments any minute now, I promise you. So if you would just let me continue the way matters are going, please. We move on to all of you people who are listening in and wish to make representation. And in the fashion I've got it here, I will ask Mr. Mudd now to make his presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was surprised a bit to hear that there's been an application for the licence, not for the sale of alcohol, but because of the outside events. But I now understand that the two are intimately connected. The planning authority approved the building on application reference DC/20/03756 as office accommodation and visitor facilities in connection with the existing vineyard and stated that it shall only be used as ancillary to the main agricultural vineyard use of the site and for no other purpose. The approved operating times were 8 AM to 6 PM, Mondays to Fridays, 9 AM to 6 PM on Saturdays, and 10 AM to 5 PM on Sundays. The local authority placed restrictions on changes of use to enable it to retain control over the development in the interests of residential and rural amenity, as this development was permitted for very specific purposes. The application for licensing, with its wide hours, appears to be a departure from what was approved. It says that the vineyard will host a variety of events from time to time, such as weddings and private events. And unless the definition of and scope of these events is very limited, they would appear to fall outside the permitted use of the facility. So, leaving that aside, whether or not it's possible or not, if a license is granted, I don't think that the proposed control measures are satisfactory to ensure that the quality of life of the neighbouring properties is preserved, and it will not be wholly in the interests of residential and rural amenity. Little Finborough is a tiny village, and I'm keen that we and all our neighbouring village residents and businesses remain considerate and harmonious, and that we all take into account the needs and desires of others. And the Scarf family themselves have said this in their events dispersal policy, which says, we encourage the building and maintaining of close relationships with our neighbours, local residents and other business operators. The premises operate a good neighbour policy and run and manage the business with a view to this policy. So I hope that if a licence is granted, conditions can be written, agreed and applied in a way that will satisfy everyone. I've noted a few issues here that I think need to be clarified or subject to changes in the proposed conditions. The excess noise, and I understand now that that's inextricably joined with alcohol sales. We have to be able to allow our gardens as residents at any time of the year, and the number of events that have been proposed, that's 14 big events and an unlimited number of smaller events, is greater than what I would expect from the statement from time to time. The proposed controls, as they're written, would allow that those events could be collected together. So you could have the events with more than 51 people all collected together in the summer months, so that there's at least one event every weekend throughout the summer months when other people want to be using their gardens. And there's no assurance that an event with fewer than 50 people will be any quieter than a larger event, because the sound level is not dependent on how many people are listening to it. And we know that sound travels a long way. When the local fete was held on the meadow opposite the vineyard, I could clearly hear that in my garden, and it occurred during the event and when people were arriving and leaving. But that was a community event, and it only took place for 2 evenings and 1 day in the year. The notification to local residents that's in the conditions says that it's going to be on a website and on a notice board regularly. That puts the onus on the people locally to go and check, unless the events are notified several months in advance. And it's nice to have the ability to find out when the events will be taking place, but there shouldn't be any disturbance that we need to be informed of anyway. So there should be no need to notify us, but it's very nice that they're planning to do that. And also, if there's no disturbance, there won't be any needs for any complaints. But if there is necessary, then if it is found necessary to make a complaint, then there needs to be an assurance that that complaint will be dealt with quickly, and there'll be procedures put in place to stop the same cause occurring in the future. So, and even if the noise itself from the event is kept very quiet and doesn't disturb the neighbours, there's still the issue of large increases in the amount of traffic. Up to 50 cars, assuming there's no overflow parking, could be leaving the site at any one time. So that's at least half an hour's consistent traffic. They'll be accelerating as they leave the vineyard, and that will be as they go past the neighbouring properties. That will result in lots of additional noise, and especially late at night, headlights perpetually lighting up people's gardens and front windows. It will also potentially affect the rural area of the rural nature of the area, with increased pressures on nocturnal wildlife that's trying to cross a road that's previously been very quiet and suddenly has got very, very large amounts of traffic on it. Talking about noise level measurements, the method proposed doesn't assure that a consistent level is acceptable to the neighbouring residents will be maintained. The type of noise affects its tendency to result in annoyance. So if there's a thudding beat of some music, it's much more obtrusive than an even toned noise. So the absolute intensity as measured by a decibel meter is not the only determinant. And the judge who judges what is acceptable noise appears to be entirely with the applicants and without consulting with the neighbours. The effect of the light pollution on the character of the area and the wildlife has to be avoided. I know the path lights have been approved by the planning authority, but I can't find any description of what the other external lighting would be for any outside events. So if a license application and proposed conditions are to provide flexibility, just so that the scarves are not limited in what they can and cannot do at any particular time, but that they plan far fewer events than actually the maximum permitted, I think the conditions should be written to reflect what actually is proposed to be taking place. So thank you, committee and chair, for your attention and taking all these points into consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mudd. I was making certain amount of notes there as you were speaking. I would just ask Nigel, it's something that people have difficulty with is understanding the planning permissions and the licensing permissions. Now you mentioned the approval for the planning, and I think, Nigel, if you can just explain that one more time as to how not one trumps the other, but how and what we are dealing with here today, please. It would be helpful.
Yes, Chair. It's really a matter of they do trump each other if one is more restrictive than the other. As I said earlier, you are making the decision on the impact that the application has on the licensing objectives, and that's all you're considering. If the premises doesn't actually have planning permission to operate as a licensed premises, that doesn't prevent you issuing the license, but it does prevent the owner of that property operating under that license until they have the relevant planning consent. So the obligation is always on the owner or the occupier of the premises to comply with both sets of legislation. So if they may be able to comply with the licensing, but if they can't comply with the planning as well, they leave themselves open to enforcement action under that legislation. I hope that
Thank
is
you. Clear. Yeah, thank you, Nigel. That's very helpful. Being chairman of planning and chair of licensing, I've had to battle with this for many years, but I just hope that puts that in a bit of a more perspective for everybody to understand, and that we focus specifically on the licensing for objectives today. So I'll ask my colleagues. Councillor Otten, do you have any questions at all?
I know we are supposed to be obviously concentrating on the alcohol licence, but it would be useful to know, we have in the paperwork the planning application with limited times. Is there another planning application imminent then on the enlarged proposals.
I don't think we can even discuss that, Councillor Otten. We've got to look at what's before us, and if that happens at a later date as a result of whatever our result is today, then so be it. Am I right there, Nigel?
Yeah, and that's certainly not a question Mr. Mudd can answer, because I'm sure
No, exactly.
he's not privy to that kind of information.
It just seems slightly cart before the horse a bit, you know.
Well,
it's
sorry,
entirely,
Penny, but we've been doing this for long enough, and it really is a very difficult one. But it's not for Mr. Mudd to answer, as Nigel says.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. Okay.
So, do you have a question for Mr. Mudd at all? That was my.
Oh no, beg your pardon, Chairman. No.
That mine. Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Muller. Do you have a question at all for Mr. Mudd?
No questions for Mr. Mudd, thank you, Chair.
And can I ask the applicant, Catherine, if she would like to have any questions at all, please?
No questions, thank you.
Right. And I think that covers that side of things. Thank you, Mr. Mudd. Thank you for your presentation. And as I said, I made quite a few notes as you spoke. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will now move on to Mr. Smith and Mrs. Crickmore, and you can take. I know, Mrs. Crickmore, you were going to pass some comment earlier, so if you want to start, and then you know, tell us your side of things, and then perhaps Mr. Smith follow afterwards. Would that be appropriate for you?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you very
off
much.
you go then. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like just to begin by pointing out that this is not a licence renewal, as already has been said. It is a first application for a new licence. The building itself has not even been fully constructed yet, and when the planning permission was granted, it was for use as ancillary to the main agricultural use of the vineyard site. It is also located on the edge of a very rural community. And again, if you look at page 41 of the document sent out with the notice of hearing, the car park is in the very tiny little corner opposite where it says Builderston Road in white, and the hedging on the other side is actually our property. So our property in particular is within about 20 yards of the car park, and as Catherine mentioned, with overflow parking, the access road to Fen Farm opposite the site has a set-aside grass area that goes to the bottom of our garden, which they have previously used as overflow car parking when the village fete has been held. And on that occasion, our property was turned into virtually a roundabout with a one-way system for the overflow car park, which I would not want on any circumstances. So if I move on, I am very strongly opposed to the licensing application, as it is so far removed from the original plan for a tasting building, visitor centre and office accommodation that the planning department agreed to. Items 7 and 8 of the planning restriction placed on the development when the planning was granted. The additional footfall and vehicular traffic this licence will bring to the area will cause loss of amenity to our property and nuisance prejudicial to health for residents in the area. And by that, there will be increased traffic, causing danger to horse riders, walkers and other road users in an area where there is no public footpath and only just enough room for 2 cars to park. Personally, as I have already mentioned, our property is one of the closest to the venue. It's just been cut off on the aerial photograph. It is a listed building, and as such, we have no double glazing to alleviate noise pollution, which means we will be disproportionately affected. Increased noise will disturb grazing for my horse in his field. I've previously needed to sedate him for safety at times of excessive noise because it scares him. Personal use of our gardens will be disrupted for all residents in the area. again, if you look at the picture of the field, you will see the hedging of our boundary is directly opposite the car park and the visitor centre, which means that we will be directly in line of any antisocial behaviour that may occur at closing time. When cars are leaving the site late at night with doors banging and vehicles speeding away, that's within 20 yards of our property, of our garden. Specific restrictions were made by the planning department regarding this site, limiting operating hours between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday, 9 till 6 Saturdays, 10 till 5 on Sundays. The site itself was approved for office accommodation, visitor facilities in connection with the vineyard only and for no other purpose. In conclusion, I sincerely request that you either refuse this licence or allow it to go forward for off sales only. I'm unhappy for on sales because the on sales come with the addition of live amplified music and amplified recorded music, which is going to cause a great deal of concern for local residents. It will be impossible for residents to live a happy life with 20 indoor events and 20 outdoor events, amplified live or recorded music annually. These events could cover almost every weekend throughout the year. With marquees, there is absolutely no soundproofing at all if the music finishes at 11 and then people are leaving at 11:30. If there were off-licence sales at the vineyard, for vineyard visits, there could be ticketed events for tours, which include wine tasting. So there would not necessarily need to be a licence for on sales. There could just be a licence for off sales. That would be the only way I could see that this would move forward. Those are my views. Thank you very much for giving me the time. Is that okay? Has everybody heard that? No, they've got me on.
So you're on mute, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? Looking at the location of the proposed car park on the Builderston Road, which is printed, and then it says Fens Farm. So I'm on the right area, aren't I? And then there's sort of like a grade area, which isn't. Is that the unattended piece of land? Pardon?
There's a grey road. You've got the little blue dot where it says Fens Farm, and if you go to the right of that, it says Builderston Road again.
Yes.
And there's sort of a dark area which is a shadow of the hedge, and the green area to the right of that is my garden.
Yeah, but what's the area that's not cultivated? There's a big sort of greyish looking area. Is that a menage or something, or is that owned by the?
I can't really understand what you're looking at.
There's a wood on one side of the road, on the top half of the picture, then the road, and then underneath where it says Builderston Road, which is upside down, underneath that is our garden. There's a wood on the other side of the road, which. Oh right, no,
I've turned to the right and headed off further towards where there's yes, I understand now. I've got my orientation right.
I think the greyed area that you're looking at is where the new house has been built.
Ah, right, thank you for that. That helps me. That's located me and delocated me and relocated me, so I know where you are now. Yeah, okay.
So if you go down towards the far point,
to
the right hand side of where that grey blob is.
Yeah, and where is? Yeah, I've got it. Where is the field for your horse then?
Behind where it says Builderston Road, that's my grass field.
Underneath.
Oh, I see. I've got it. Yeah.
If Builderston Road is upside down, you'll see that there's a corner of that. Yeah. That's part of our property, and that's the grass field.
Got you.
Actually, this aerial photograph doesn't show the car park, but the car park is right opposite where it says road. RD.
Got you.
The car park is right in that tiny
all right.
corner.
I've got my orientation now. Yes, I understand. I understand. Thank you for that clarity. And now, thank you for that. Now then, sorry, I've rather jumped in there. Councillor Otten, do you have any questions at all for?
No,
Crickmore? No. Councillor Muller, do you have any questions for Mr. Crickmore?
Just one for clarification, if I may, please, Chair. Mrs. Crickmore, you said that if the overflow car park is used by going into Fen Farm, that your property is basically in the middle of a roundabout. So would it be that the exit from there will be the other side of your property, please?
That's what has happened in the past. If you
Right.
see the blue blob on the aerial photograph where it says Fen Farm, the village green is to the left, which is where they had the fete once a year, and on the right there's a small sort of triangular shape before you get to our hedge and our field. Cars were all parked along there, and the Scarfs have actually got a set-aside track that goes down the back of our field, and the overflow car parking, they would come in off the road and park on that little part of grass. Then they would drive down the set-aside, which would go all the way behind our property and join up with Jack's Lane, which isn't on this aerial photograph, Jockey's Lane. And that would then make our property into a roundabout. So they'd come past the front of the house to go onto the overflow car park. Then they'd go behind the back of the house when they leave, along the set-aside to join Jockey's Lane, which is a road used as a public path, and then rejoin the Builderston Road again. Now, when it was for the village fete and it was only once a year, you don't mind, you get over it. But if they're planning on using...
Yes, I was going to say I've got the orientation of it. So that sort of answers your question, Councillor Muller, is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Crickmore. That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Yeah,
thank you. Now, let's see where we are. Kay, do you have any questions at all?
Just one point that Mrs. Crickmore said about if they were to just have off sales and sell tickets for tasting. Unfortunately, that would constitute an on sale, so they would still need to be licensed for that, because if there's any sale taking place, it needs to be licensed.
So if they bought tickets for a vineyard tour, they wouldn't be able to give free drink away?
No, because they'd have to buy a ticket to get their free drink, so therefore it still constitutes a sale.
Yeah. Of the applicant. So if I ask Catherine Scarf, do you have any questions for Mrs. Crickmore at all?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Smith, would you like to add something, as you said you wish to speak?
Yes, please. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Smith and I live at America Cottage on Builderston Road. I would like to add some additional points. I think probably one or two crossover from other people's points already. The original application considered light for a visitor centre and office accommodation closing at 6 in the evening. Using the building for other activities after dark would require additional lighting. This would change the nature of the area and potentially affect local wildlife. This was not considered when the planning authority approved the lighting plan, because it was generally during daylight hours. There is currently parking provision, I know we've covered this a little bit, for 50 cars. For events with more than 50 people, it is possible that the parking may be insufficient and overflow parking would need to be in place. This would further increase the traffic noise and disturbance. I've now just learned that the overflow parking will be potentially next to my property on the end of our garden. Is this going to be tarmacked? Is this going to be a hard standing? Because at the moment it's a field, set aside field, it's grass. And in our field we have and in the hedgerows we have various types of wildlife there, which include owls. We've got hares in the field. We've got badgers that now come in. These would be adversely affected. I'm not sure about bats. They may well be there as well, but I haven't had a census on the wildlife. This is just knowing now or learning now that we're going to have an overflow car park at the end of the gardens. Not really what I want. During the day, we experience occasional disturbance from passing agricultural, commercial and domestic traffic. Much of this is very necessary for the functioning of business in the area, but it remains a predominantly rural area. If an event venue is allowed to run, music will be heard constantly at night. With the increase in the volume of traffic, this will change the character of the area for the worse, I feel, not only for myself, but for other residents in the area. The original planning approval was for the building to have wine tastings and tours of the vineyard. The new proposals to turn the building into the equivalent, I feel, of a public house, with multiple choices of alcohol being served until 11 o'clock at night, rather than vineyard wines being sold until 6. The events dispersal policy, as does the signage for proof of age and requesting people to leave the premises quietly, that signage confirms the venue will be run as a pub, in my view, which again is in direct conflict to the granted planning permission for a visitor centre. And for these reasons, I'm against the application. Thank you very much, Chair, for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Nigel, can I once again bring you in, please, because there's a couple of things here. It's people are very concerned, but it's a lot of it is on the planning issue. And I quite understand. And my view would be that the set aside agricultural, arable, whatever you call it, land would need planning permission for change of use to a car park. And my view would also be that the issues that people are raising, quite understandably, that again, it would be a planning issue and an enforcement issue for change of use, etc. Could you just confirm my views in your views as well, bearing in mind your licensing, and all we are dealing with, unfortunately, is the licensing aspect. But I want to give comfort to the people that are raising these issues that we can and have in the past given licensing, but if there's something that stops it, there's something would stop it and would have to be resolved. We are dealing with the licensing. Would you just confirm that again, please?
That's correct, Chair. As I said before, if the property does not have the benefit of the appropriate planning permission and the correct planning use, it cannot operate under that legislation. It may have a licence under the 2003 Act, the Licensing Act, but if it doesn't comply with the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990, then it cannot operate. There won't be licensing enforcement, but there will be planning enforcement. And as I said before, you're just concerned with the 4 licensing objectives of this application.
Yeah, thank you. And I really wanted you to reiterate that to give comfort to the people that are listening. We haven't had our debate yet, but, you know, I think people need to understand that there are 2 issues here and we have to look at both. But being chair of planning, I know applications have to go in for change of use and modification and enforcement, etc. And I can see Dave nodding his head. That's also on planning as well. So whilst I hear your points of view there, they will be taken into account, but not in a discussion that we may have regarding the licensing activities. So I will just ask, Penny, do you have any further questions for Mr. Smith? Councillor Otten, sorry.
No, thank you, Chairman.
And Councillor Muller?
No questions, thank you, for Mr. Smith. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Crickmore. We have made copious notes, and when we go to debate, we will certainly take all those points forward. So,
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Does Catherine have any questions for Mr. Smith as the separate contributor to this. Do you have any further questions or for him?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Right. So we've been round everybody to ask all the questions. So I think we now go to the applicant to come up with a final statement. Is that correct, Nigel?
Yes, Chair, and unless the licensing officer has anything to add at this point, it's then for the applicant.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I will, sorry, I briefly asked Kay and I didn't sort of specify that. So, Kay, do you have any further things to add?
No, Chair.
I just asked questions and to add. And so now I'll come back to you, Catherine Scarf, to just give your final closing statement, as the applicant always has the opportunity to do that. So if you'd like to add anything, we'd be pleased to hear it. Thank you.
So thank you very much for all being here today and to being able to listen to everyone's, concerns and for our application as well. Everything that's kind of been agreed with environmental health is to ensure that we protect our neighbours with public noise and nuisance, and ensuring that we look at the licensing objectives. And further from that, and from the comments that were received initially, we drew up noise management plans, dispersal policies, and others which were circulated to ensure that we do enforce these and make sure that we do protect the concerns of our neighbours as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we move on to exclusion of the public. So I think everybody's had sufficient time, and on the basis that the subcommittee considers that the public interest in excluding the public outweighs the public interest in its deliberation being held in public, it is resolved that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for item 6 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12 of the Act, on the grounds set out in the Regulation 14(2) of the Licensing Act 2003 (Hearings), Regulations 2005. May I have a member to propose the motion, please?
Happy to propose, Chair. Thank you.
And a seconder, please.
Second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. What will happen now is we will pause the live stream, and the members of the subcommittee and the legal officer only will go to a different room to fulfil their debate and come out with a conclusion. So there will be a delay now for those of you waiting. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, thank you very much all for your patience in waiting. I will ask Nigel to give us the result of our deliberations. Thank you, Nigel. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody for waiting. You can imagine the members have deliberated quite carefully on this matter, and the decision they've reached is actually a majority decision of 2 votes to 1. But the decision they have come to is that they are generally satisfied that the proposed conditions agreed with Environmental Protection Services sufficiently mitigate the concerns relating to the noise, light and traffic concerns raised by the local residents. However, they're granting the application subject to changes to some of the conditions and the addition of a further condition. The conditions to be amended are condition 2, which will include a provision that notifications will also be carried out by letters to the immediate neighbours of the property. Condition 4 will be amended insofar as that the total number of events per calendar month will be 3 rather than 4, and the reasoning that the members came to this decision was that it was generally expected that these types of events will be held during the summer months, and which will kind of make it possible or even likely that every weekend will hold an event, because it's kind of considered that they would tend to be on the Saturdays or the Sundays. So reducing it to 3 per month would at least make sure that there is at least one weekend in every month of the summer where no event will be taking place. The other slight amendment to that condition is that the licensable activities in outdoor areas shall cease by 2300 rather than 2330. And condition 5 should also be amended in a similar way, in that all events of those natures shall terminate by 2300. And the additional condition was one that wasn't actually discussed during the committee, but was raised during the conversation the members were having, and that is for there to be a prohibition of all fireworks at any event at the premises. So therefore no fireworks will be allowed, which are quite common these days for wedding events, but it was felt that given the environment and the nature of the area, it was important to include that condition. Any party present to this subcommittee who made representations is aggrieved by the decision or the imposition of any of the conditions can appeal against the decision or any of the conditions, and that appeal should be made in writing to the Magistrates Court within 21 days of receiving written notice of the subcommittee's decision. I'll now hand back to the chair, Councillor Guthrie.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was very a fulsome response to what we had debated. And before I close the meeting, I would just remind everybody that the planning issues do need to be directed through the planning group in Mid Suffolk District Council. So they all need to be addressed. And we can't do that in licensing, but I felt that I ought to mention it as much of it was discussed during our meeting. So I'll thank everybody for their attendance and now close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.